Hello, my friend. Welcome. I hope you're having an outstanding day. This is Heather. This is the Back to Me podcast. And today we're talking to another awesome human being about all the things about being human and navigating life. And today I am talking with JJ Flizanes, and we are talking about, oh my gosh, so much stuff, but sabotage and happiness. And they don't really go together very well, do they?
Well,
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, Heather. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. Um, yeah, I know. I mean, my guests know that it's kind of a free flow conversation, and sometimes when I announce the topic, we go off topic, and it ends up in all over the place. But I do try to stay on track. And when I start, I'm always interested in how you got into this. Because you're a coach. So what brought you into this version of coaching you're doing now? Because I know you were doing something else previously.
Well, I was a personal trainer,
Yes.
but before that, I was acting, and before that, I was dancing, and part of it is just the human. Yeah, well, they all connect. Actually, I was being interviewed by Dr. Nasha Winters to her doctor. She wrote the Metabolic Approach to Cancer, and she
Okay.
is a naturopathic oncologist. And I interviewed her a bunch of times, and we became friends. And the work I do became important to the work that she's doing, because in the Metabolic Approach to Cancer, she looks at 10 different terrain aspects of why disease becomes. You don't just get cancer overnight. You don't just get sick overnight. And it's
Right.
like growing your food, or growing a plant, or being pregnant. Like, there's a certain period of time where it takes a while to develop whatever is happening. And we're only really seeing the results at like the worst part of it, but it was, incubating, if you will, for a long time. And so she does a terrain based approach. And the 10th terrain is emotional. It's funny, mental and emotional wellness. And as I finished the book and read that chapter, I thought, man, she didn't talk about emotions in there at all. Like, she talked about cravings and
Wow.
about emotions, but not how to deal with them. And so I said, Nisha, this is what I do, and this is what we do. I have trainers, and what are you teaching your doctors to do about the emotional piece? And she's like, well, I really don't, because that's sort of like the biggest part. And that's not their zone of gene. That's not what they do. They're physicians. They're looking at the diagnostics and at the body. And so then she brought me on to do a presentation in front of the doctors. And at first I got a little like upper limited, because I thought, oh my gosh, here I am, because I'm not a licensed clinical psychologist, but I
Right.
have been coaching people for a long time. And I put together all the pieces of sort of how I got here. And as I was telling the longer version of the story, I was like, oh, yeah, this is exactly why I'm qualified to do this, because of the path that I've taken to get here, and how it's really the thing I've been talking about my whole life. I mean, who doesn't want to feel better? It's really about everything's about emotions, but most people don't. Like, they hear that and they glaze over, because they don't really understand what that means. They just know they want to feel better, but they think that they can feel better by losing weight, or by making more money, or by finding the perfect partner, or by getting married, or by getting divorced, and or whatever it is. And it's that simple. Those are conditions, and the goal is to understand how to be unconditional, and how the healing happens on the inside of us, not on the outside of us.
And we don't really understand. We don't understand how to deal with emotions. I think people glaze over it just because they don't know what to do with it. It's not something. I. It's not. I mean, just came into my mind that book, Emotional Intelligence, but it's not something that we're often really know how to manage. We get rewarded for some emotions. We get told to shut down other emotions when we're young, and you know, depending on whether you're a boy or a girl. I mean, in traditional roles. But it is interesting that I'd never made that. I guess instinctively I understand it, but I'd never made that intellectual connection that that's a terrain for disease. So that's so. And how did that develop for you? Like, how did you? I know it's like of course when you say it, I'm like, of course,
Well, it's called
but
epigenetics, which is there's no science higher than epigenetics in quantum physics.
right,
It's your gene expression based on your environment and on the inside. So you can't talk about how something reacts in the body without understanding the environment that it's in. It's like looking at the minuscule cells and the genes. without recognizing what container it's in. It's like if you're in a container of stress, then your body shuts down. It's in fight or flight. It's not in healing mode. But most
Right.
people try to heal things in fight or flight. Like they're constant, like their life depends on it. And what they don't understand is they're fighting an uphill battle, because and there's the how did I get here in the first place emotional aspect of what am I reacting to. If most people, I usually do this with men more than I do it with women, but I'm sure if I asked you, Heather, like whenever you get embarrassed, what happens to you?
My face turns red.
Right. What about when you get nervous?
My face turns red.
Oh, okay.
I'm a ginger, so any emotional reaction, often my face goes red.
Okay. So that's all we need. That's a physical reaction to an emotion.
Right?
So, and there's others. People have, neck pain, back pain, stomach knots, stomach and knots, butterflies in their stomach, higher heartbeat, start to sweat. These are physical reactions to an emotion. Yet,
Right?
what happens if you hold on to anger for years and years and years? You think nothing happens? That's like where back pain and cancer comes from. So, but again, we don't think of it like that. We think it has to be something external to us, but we are constantly affecting how our biology reacts based on what we're holding on to energetically inside of us.
Right? And I guess once people are aware of that, then they have to figure out, what do you do with that information? So if you know that holding on to, I mean, do you label them as positive and negative emotions?
Yes, I do. And I have actually a handout, and anyone that wants it, it's my number one tool. Every time I start a 6-month deep dive group coaching program, it's the first thing we cover. I created a course called The Roadmap to Emotional Healing. It's the first thing we cover. And it's
Right?
the first thing we cover because regardless of if you know your core wounds and your love languages and your upper limits and your zone of genius, you don't have to know any of those things to just know how to figure out how to feel better in the moment and how to get your needs met. Because the only reason why we ever have a negative emotion is because we have a need that's not being met, or the perception of a need that's not being met. So once you can establish that and then figure out what your needs are, then you can figure out some strategies to get them met, especially that don't require anyone else to be different. But when you can take that on, now you have true self-empowerment because you can figure out what you need and get it met. And then you don't have to blame anybody else, manipulate anybody else, yell at anybody else, get in any kind of fights or demand or give your power away to other people. And anyway, that handout is called, it's a feelings and needs list. And there's about 100 different feeling words on it. And there's 86 basic human needs on it. This isn't needy or dependent or weak. There's no judgment. It's things like air, hydration, water, food, sustenance, shelter, safety, acknowledgement, connection, to be seen, to be heard. So everything on there is a basic human need. And sometimes I even start out sessions with clients in the past to say, take this sheet and circle all the needs that aren't being met. Forget that there's not a problem in this red hot moment, but like what needs in your life are not being met regularly. And
Right?
then can we work on that? Like if we want to be happier, maybe we have to learn how to get those needs met or ask for what we need instead of assuming someone else is going to figure it out. So yeah, the emotional piece is the most important piece, and no one is ever taught what to do with any of it.
No,
And yeah, none of it. And
none
then
of
here
it.
we are fighting wars and getting divorced and marrying people for the wrong reasons and, overeating and sabotaging our diets. And what is it? What's driving all that? All your emotions. But you think it's the food. You think it's the doctor. You think it's the and not that these things, the environment doesn't affect you. It does. But I think people think that feelings are just like floating in the air and like, oh, all of a sudden I wasn't feeling bad and then you did something and now I'm feeling bad. So it must be your fault. And I could see how that would make some bit of sense. But what we forget is that we have a brain that interprets what was said or done. And it's the interpretation that creates the feeling, not the other person or the situation. It's our filter that creates the interpretation. That means, because for some people, that scenario, whatever you're thinking of right now, or you could be thinking of, for some people would be very upsetting, and for some people they wouldn't care. So what's the
Right?
difference? The
Right?
difference is their interpretation of it and what it means to them. And not everybody reacts the same way about everything.
You just reminded me of an ex that I had who if he stubbed his toe, he would be mad at the chair. and he would yell at the chair and he would kick the chair. It's like, the chair didn't do anything to you. It's kind of like that kind of thing just pops into my mind. It's like that person didn't do something to you. You got angry, and now you're in that angry state. And I guess that the first step that people often have to take is to recognize that they show that, I mean, there's a reaction state and then there's the emotion, and you choose whether you decide to stay there.
Right. The first thing that happens, your reaction initially, it's, I do a core wound map and I take people through a core wound exercise, but then we come and we create, like, at the end, a map, and it really lists, it goes from the core wound to the emotion that comes up because of that. And then the reaction that you, like, what do you do? And this happens really quickly. It's not something someone can necessarily catch in the beginning, but what we can do is, when we see the pattern and we know that it's happening,
Right.
the awareness will cause enough space for us to be able to, at least when we get to the action piece, either do something different, do the opposite, or go back and this happens. I did a 3-month version of my 6-month group last year, just to see if 3 months was enough. And everyone in that group would have told you 3 months was great and that they all got a lot of results. They changed their lives, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Okay. But then I realized, no, it's not enough time. I want it to sink in on a deeper level, which is why now I only do 6 or 12-month group courses.
Right.
But in the case of one of the gentlemen that was in the course, he was talking about an interpretation of his dad. And in one conversation, we changed the interpretation and wiped away 30 years of pain.
Wow.
So now when he thinks about the same situation, he feels love. He doesn't feel sadness and anger anymore. And it's that the beauty of that interpretation, when we understand that you don't, just because you have a feeling doesn't mean you actually interpreted it correctly, or that there isn't 5 other versions of that. So
Right.
the idea of, blaming the chair, it sounds like your ex had a lot of pent up anger and fear that then
Oh,
he
yes.
just projected onto the chair because it was easy to do, because the chair wasn't going to confront him back.
Exactly.
Right. But that's definitely an indicator of some repressed stuff that wants to come out.
There's a reason he's an ex.
Of course. Yes, definitely.
Right. Yeah, and it is true. I mean, if you can find that pattern, and I agree with you, 3 months would be too short to get those patterns and to really solidify the practice of somehow pressing that pause and then choosing the reaction state. And do you find that it's easier for some people than others to have that flip, or do they just, is it a conscious choosing a specific emotion, or just stepping away from the one that was going to pop out? That's
Well,
two questions, I know, but
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of many different people who've been to the program. So that happened. That was a really fast, and that person, because that person was super hungry for all of this information. Like, I have a few podcasts and I swear he listened to one of them 12 times.
Oh my
He was
gosh.
just really, he was in that, taking everything in mode because of where he was in his life and relationship. And so he really just was there. He was super ready. And then there are other people who come in and they think they want one thing and they end up with something different on the other side. Or in this last group that I did last year, the group started in April, ended in October-ish, beginning of November. And now they have a saying, which I love. I'm going to bring this forward into the group this year and moving forward, where they'll come and share how they were different in the same situation. Because my definition of healing, and this came out of having therapists as clients, having therapists as friends, and then having my listeners come to me for sessions after being in therapy for 5 years, 7 years, and having a huge shift after 2 sessions. It just became a pattern. And I thought, okay. And I thought it because I had seen enough therapists and I liked a little bit about each of them in different ways. But generally, I felt like it was a big waste of time, quite honestly. I
Right.
thought that the whole structure of therapy, in fact, I even created a talk called 3 Reasons Why Talk Therapy is Ineffective, because of some of the ways in which we deal with emotion. People just think just talking about the same story over and over again is going to make you feel better. And it's like, no, it's not. And there were no exercises and we weren't getting to core wounds. And then you're the victim of your story and you're going to continue being the victim of your story. Your life's not going to change. So I've come up with a saying. It's all my audience knows that it's that what healing is when you're different in the same situation. You're not avoiding the situation. You're not running away from the situation. You're not conditional, because you can't control conditions. So but you can change you. So if we reinterpret, if we heal some of these wounds, then when the same thing happens, you don't get triggered anymore. You don't react the same way. You don't feel the same way. That is, to me, healing. So they've
Yeah.
been doing this really fun thing of like, I just wanted to share that I was different in the same situation. So, because again, it's that integration piece, which is why the whole thing needs to be longer than 3 months, because we need to take the work that we do in the 3 months and then live the work in the next 3 months and then use it on a daily basis. Like one of the guys I had yesterday in this year's group, he's done a lot of work. He's been in a rehab program. He's done different kinds of inner child work. He's had a therapist, and now he's in my group. And it's funny when we talked about some of these like healing childhood wound kind of things. Like, oh, I've done that. I'm like, I know. And with you, I go, it's doing it once doesn't change how you live. We need to look at and examine your day-to-day thought patterns, your day-to-day behaviors, how you're treating yourself, because it's in those subtle changes and listening to what you're telling yourself, the story, that's what's going to make the biggest. You can go into a situation and go through a healing process, but if you don't apply that to how you talk to yourself, how you look at yourself, how you look at the world, how you interpret things, then it was a nice exercise, but it won't impact how you show up every day.
Right. It's like those courses that you take that you say, oh, that was interesting, and you put it on the shelf. Or you buy a gym membership, you get the personal trainer workout, and then you never do it. So you're not going to change anything if you don't do it. And I mean, I like calling all of those things practice, right? Maybe because I've been teaching yoga for so long. It's like all of it is a practice, and you can always tweak it, and it can always be better. But you need that awareness that you want to keep changing and to keep making it better. And I think it's interesting that I am one of those people who, when I get into something, I'll listen to it like 20 times. So I totally understand that guy. Like, I need to just hear it and hear it and hear it until I've got it solid in my head. And this is a conversation that I often have with my partner, that I find I understand the place for talk therapy, and that's where a lot of people start. But I do find that it leaves them stuck in that cycle without a way to exit. There's no exit ramp.
Right. That's one of the biggest problems, is because you get stuck in your story and the person is supposedly supposed to reflect back to you what you're saying, but they never question if you're the one who has the problem, because they're supposed to be on your side. So you hear, it's like some people just get validated for years. Oh, yeah, that must be terrible the way you feel. It's like, okay, this is not useful if it doesn't change. Again, that's why I said healing, because I would watch clients of mine that were therapists with their patients, and they would tell them basically to avoid the things that triggered them. I'm like, well, that's not healing. That's not healing. Healing is when you're different, not circumstances. Good luck trying to control that for the rest of your life. That's
Right.
ridiculous.
And that also cuts you off from the experience of a full life. If you just start avoiding things that bother you, like, how much does your world end up shrinking and shrinking every time you get upset about something?
Right. Life is a mirror, and it's going to keep showing you what you need to work, and you can either run from it or you can embrace it and change it. So people are mirrors, life is a mirror, and, good luck with that, outrunning that piece.
Go live as a hermit on a mountain,
Right.
in a cave.
Right.
Maybe. But there still needs to be met while you're up there.
Right.
How many needs did you say are on your needs list?
86.
86. Wow. That's extensive. I wouldn't have thought that. I guess I'm thinking of, I think sometimes of conversations that I see people have, and I think you need some kind of, like, you have to be willing to look at what it is, what your reaction is, and take ownership and responsibility for your reaction. So I know two people who, if one of them says something and they're trying to find a way to ask for something that they need in a way that sounds non-threatening, and the other person reacts as it's a criticism. So this is probably fairly common. But the struggle is the person who is having the negative reaction does not recognize that that's not the right interpretation. And,
Right.
taking that personal responsibility for your reactions, I think, is a big step for a lot of people.
Well, in that case, it sounds like the person who's reacting, it's hitting one of their core wounds. So they are so triggered that they can't hear or try to hear what the other person's saying. But there is a language to saying things that don't also require the other person to be defensive. Most of the time, as humans, when someone says, I need this, and the energy or you're inferring that the other person's to blame or that's their responsibility to get that need met for you, most of us will get defensive because
Right.
innately we understand that you're the creator of your own reality, and there's no situation where I'm responsible for how you feel or how you show up in the world. None. So our inner being knows that. It knows that I am not to be blamed for your reaction or choices or feelings, but I can be of service and help you if you come to me in a different energy. And
Right.
someone can help, but I have a 3-step process that goes with this feelings and needs list. And the first one is to, ask yourself how you feel. Like, what am I feeling? And again, you'll never do this when you're in a good mood. You only do this when you're in a bad mood or when something negative happens because, again, a need is not being met or the perception of a need. So, I mean, you might be getting the need. You just don't know you're getting it met because of the way that you're interpreting. Again, like you said, you're not interpreting it in a way that means something to you that's positive. So it's, how do I feel? What need is not being met? And that's always the hardest question because people
Right.
relate their needs to other people. Well, I need you to. No. I need her to. I need them to. I need the world to. No. Yeah, not going to control that. So, it's normally, and even if it can be as simple as like turning it around like the mirror. I need you to respect me more. Well, that tells me that you need to respect you more. So the
Right.
message there is if you have a need for respect, guess who's not respecting you? You. Because you can't force anyone to respect you, but you can make choices that don't allow those people in, which is
Right.
respecting you. So that the need is usually the hardest piece. That's what people aren't used to. And
That'll
the
really twist people's brains around.
Right, because we're not taught to communicate effectively about what we need or what we feel because we don't have a language for it. And then the third step is what strategy, after I know what I feel and what my need is, what strategies, more than one, can I take to get the need met that do not require anyone else to be different?
Right.
But you can ask someone for support, or like if I want more connection and I want it from another human being, well, first of all, I want more connection. I can connect with me more for sure. That's always do whatever you think you need for you first, because you're the only one that can give you all of it anyway. But then if I'm like, I really want to like connect with a human, you can't force one person to be that, but you could like look at maybe the top 5 people that you like spending time with and see who has some time and make a date and go, you know what I mean? And do something meaningful. But you can't expect someone else to know that that's what you need. You have to be able to identify it within yourself and then ask for it so you can get it. But what happens is we get super manipulative about our needs as if someone else should know. You should just know that that's what I need. Well, why should I know that? Because you didn't tell me. I'm supposed to just guess. I'm supposed to guess, and they'll get mad at you for not knowing, but they didn't even know enough to ask for it. So it's all this assuming. But yeah, these are the basic, like if we could all just do this, there wouldn't be any war. There wouldn't be like, we'd be good. Everyone could come to the table and like own up their crap. It's like the most basic thing.
Right. I just was reminded of the husband says, "How are you?" The wife says, "Fine." It's like he knows he's in trouble, but he doesn't know why, because she probably doesn't know why she's mad.
Exactly.
I just
Exactly.
know I'm mad at you for something.
Yep. And women are the worst at it. I mean, they do it subconsciously because unfortunately it works. Like I used to have a lot of male clients as a trainer and I would yell at them all the time. And I said, yes, your wives are super manipulating and they emotionally control you but you let them. So that's we can't just blame them and say they're emotionally manipulative. They are because it works, because you comply. So
Yeah.
you have to take your balls back and go, I'm not going to give in. But the minute a woman cries and yells and screams, you go, what should I do? Okay, I hope you feel better. I'm like, because you can't handle someone getting upset. That's on you. That's not on them. Because if you just let it ride out like a child after they throw a temper tantrum, they'll stop. But oh no, I know. But women know that it works, so they do
Oh
it.
my God. Yeah. That's a whole Seinfeld episode around that. The crying and the fact that nobody can handle it. It's like, it's a thing. And you learn, I guess, I mean, you learn that at a very young age, what works, right? Like as an infant,
Well, you see the
as a little
modeling.
kid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you see what's being modeled for you.
Yeah. And then if you don't learn any other way, then you you just keep stay where you are. And it takes sometimes I think it takes a bolt of lightning for people to say, "Hold on a second. There's something different." That's what this podcast is for. It's supposed to be a bolt of lightning. Wait, it doesn't have to be that way. That's what I want people to see.
Right. Patterns will be repeated until learned. And that might be 3 divorces. That might be, cancer 3 times. That might be whatever gets you, however resistant you are to learning your lessons, whatever big thing has to happen to literally back you up against the wall to say, well, I guess I have to do something really different here. But
Right.
most people don't take this and run with it and go, oh, that's interesting. Let me take control of my life in that way. But when I heard Abraham say in 2001 that you're the creator of your own reality, I was like, oh, I am? Well, that's good news, because
Yeah.
then if I don't like something, I can change it. If
Right.
I'm responsible for where I'm vibrating and attracting things into my life, guess who gets to change that? Me.
Right. And take that responsibility. For listeners who don't know who Abraham is, that's Abraham Hicks. And you can always there's some good YouTube videos you can go watch of Abraham if you're just interested. So good. That's so good. And it is true. But there's almost it's like a fear. It's like it's too much responsibility for people to take responsibility for their reality and what's going on in their lives.
Then they can't complain when they get things they don't like. Like if this is too hard, just know you're not a victim, and if you're choosing to be a victim, then you're never going to be happy, because it never feels good to feel like you're a victim of anything.
Right. And and you shouldn't be scared to take control of your life. You should be excited and make that choice. I mean, yeah, you can manifest your reality. And people will say, well, I didn't manifest this illness. Well, maybe. Did you find in your work that there's a certain emotional and cancer, like a type of cancer linked to
Yes.
certain emotions?
Yes.
Oh, really? Like what? Do you have any?
Well, each cancer has a different sort of underlying root emotional and mental sort of pain or trigger.
Okay.
Breast cancer is usually a combination of a mother issue, whether it be with your mother or being a mother or wanting to be a mother or not being a mother. It's also related to overgiving. So someone
Oh,
who's been sucked dry, basically, and that they don't take care of themselves. They're sort of the consummate rescuer that's always giving to others, but never giving back to themselves or never taking time for themselves. So that's normally breast cancer. Again, all the different cancers have a root that are slightly different. I mean, the
right.
emotional, so the stories change, but it's usually some degree of shame, anger, fear, right? A lot of lower jiao, which is like pelvic stuff. So whether it be ovarian, uterine, those kinds of cancers in women are normally some kind of patriarchal male anger. There's normally something against, whether they have a history of being raped or their father abused them or they were left or they're whatever. There's normally some kind of patriarchal situation, because
Right.
that's our power center as women. And when we feel violated or not respected or not seen or heard, or we're dampening our own power, or someone's controlling our power because we're too much or they don't know how to handle it, that's
Right.
where those lower problems come in, and they're very attached to feminine energy. So if you are, activating your masculine energy more than your feminine, then you're depleting your ability to kind of heal that and use that power to help you. So they're all different. I mean, stomach is how we like digest life. So if we take life with ease and things can come in and come out, or if we hold on to things. So sometimes stomach and colon cancers are really someone who's very nervous and very worried all the time, and they don't digest life very well. Everything is very heightened. But that's just a
Right.
few.
And it's interesting about the stomach and the colon because it's almost like you can feel that physicality of that holding of that, and that you can just feel it physically in those areas of your body. Yeah, I think that's so fascinating that you can trace that back. I mean, I'm sure that some people will not agree with it, but that's okay. That's their prerogative. But I do think there is definitely something going on with all of that, just from the various clients that I have had with cancer and people that I've known and knowing them personally. You always get a sense, well, I'm not surprised by that for some reason. You know what I mean?
Well, and you have to think of how far out of alignment for how long is somebody has to be to have cancer. And again, it's the terrain base. It didn't just happen because you ate this one thing or were exposed to this one bad thing. Our body does a good job provided that you give it its tools
Yeah.
and its nutrients and its ability to detoxify, as long as that's all in check. Cancer doesn't just happen overnight. It's been
Right.
happening for a long time. So what environment are you in? Both physically as well as emotionally. And, for the people that don't agree, that's cool. That's none of my business. I don't really care if you agree or not, but I've worked with enough cancer patients to know that when you have cancer, you've been out of alignment for so long that to get them to listen to something like this is a stretch, because that's why Radical Remission exists by Kelly Turner,
Right.
Dr. Kelly Turner. If you read the book or both of them, you'll hear that the Radical Remission patients, I interviewed her once, and then I interviewed one of her staffers, like her CEO, like a year or two before, and she and I talked about that there's not a single Radical Remission survivor who hasn't done the emotional work. And they've done different levels of it, but it's about changing. I mean, most of them do very dramatic things. The doctor says, do this, and they say, nope, I'm done. I'm going to go sit on top of my roof and watch the birds every morning. And, they were terminal, and now they've been living 20, 30 years past their terminal diagnosis. So it's because most people aren't willing to make those kinds of changes. They want to blame it on some little thing that they think is, it must be this, or,
Right.
it must be my marriage. Let me get divorced. Well, yeah, but you still take you with you. So there's, again, that interpretation piece. And there's really only two ways to be in life. You're either a victim or you're the creator of your own reality, even though you're still a creator of your own reality when you're a victim, whether you know it or not. And the other one feels a lot better.
Totally.
Victim will be, you can ride that out until you're not here any longer, and it's always going to feel bad because you basically give all of your power over to something else or someone else or the world or the environment, and that's just not. When you decide that then becomes your reality, but you don't have to decide that. That's the point, is that you can decide. If you go the other extreme and take responsibility for everything, it always gives you something to do about it. You always have power over making a change and making a difference.
And sometimes the biggest change that you make is just your reaction, which is kind of circles back to where we were. I mean, life keeps unfolding, and if your biggest power is deciding how you will be, like that's a superpower that everybody has.
Absolutely. That there's nothing more powerful than someone who's unaffected by everybody, like who gets to be solid and peaceful and loving and compassionate amongst, for anyone who's religious, and I'm really not, I'm more spiritual. I look at it as a broader energy system. But Jesus said, as he was being stoned, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Here's
Right.
I'm going to love you, even though you're literally killing me right now. Like when you can transcend to that place, there's nothing more powerful than that.
Yeah. That's a good parable for sure. Amazing. Oh my gosh. So much good information. JJ, you are like a powerhouse of information. Seriously. Before we head off though, I always ask my guests at the very end for a final word of wisdom. Dun, dun.
A final word. Oh gosh.
Oh my God. It can be more than one word.
To sort of sum up my mission, if you will, is that you have the power to change anything that you want. And it all begins with your emotions, because the only reason you want what you want is because you think you'll feel better when you have it. And there's nothing else. That's it. The only reason why you want a relationship or money or whatever is because you think you'll feel better when you have it. And you have the power to feel better now. And in fact, you can't even get the thing until you feel the thing. So you got to feel it before you get it. You got to feel it to heal it. So don't be so afraid of your emotions. They're your power they're your power center. They're your life force. They're who you are. And learning and diving into them will change your life.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming here and sharing all of this because I think it's super valuable information for people. And I'm going to encourage everyone. The links for these things that we were talking about are in the show notes. So go and check them out and go and check out JJ. And yeah, if you want something different, my friends, then choose different, right? Thanks, JJ.
Thanks, Heather.
Take care, my friends.